Oh, oh, well, this is embarrassing. I sort of meant to get around to that. Well, I suppose now is as good a time as any to just come straight out with it and tell you that I am not coming to tell you about the miracle cure for procrastination that I found somewhere. I did look really hard for a long time, but I couldn't find any concrete evidence that there is a bulletproof way to solve procrastination. And I'm pretty sure that if somebody found one, they'd waste no time in telling us all about it. So, in view of my status as a current procrastinator, I procrastinated getting better shoes for this and cutting my hair. I think I'll try to explain a rather modest question, which is what is procrastination? And so, procrastination is willingly deferring something even though you expect the delay to make you worse off. Um, Thank you very much. No, I'm just kidding. That might describe a behavior, but what really fascinates me is that last bit, even though you know it will make you worse off, right? Why does someone willingly go through a process that they know will cause them lots of suffering, lots of times? In fact, it's not just me. According to a 2007 meta-analysis by Pierce Steele, about 80 to 95% of college students procrastinate. For the lucky 20 to 5% of you in the audience, let me just run through that process very, very quickly so you can start to get an idea of why this might interest me. So you've got something due tomorrow, you're trying to clear your mind, and then without really realizing, maybe I'll check out some internet at some point, and oh my God, it's a cat. It's a cat and he's longer than his bed. This is the most amusing thing I think I've seen in my entire life, I suppose. I wonder what's on Facebook. Oh, wow, it's that guy that I knew like 5 years ago, and he's in a pool, and suddenly this is fascinating to me for whatever reason. Inevitably, though, there's a reckoning, which is that you realize, oh my God, the sky's burning, I have no time to do this, I'm going to be a failure. Why did you do this to me from 20 minutes ago, you stupid, stupid person? We don't even like cats or Facebook. Normally, when you do something with such an enormous negative consequence, that will teach you to avoid that behavior. Once, when I was about 6 years old, I tried to clean the hair off a razor by running my thumb across it. And I've never, ever done that again because it hurt like hell. But with this kind of a behavior, the pattern recurs over and over for some people. About 20% of US adults are chronic procrastinators. There are people who have a hard time doing anything in any other way. Now, before I can address the question of why we don't respond to that sort of negative emotional stimulus, I think we should maybe go over some other stuff first. So if it's all right with you guys, I'm just going to put that off for a little bit later and ask another question first, which is, when did it start? When did we start procrastinating? Is it a human invention or is it something we can find in the animal kingdom? In short, do monkeys procrastinate? Now, this is a really hard question to answer. On one hand, monkeys can't really procrastinate because they don't really have full conceptions of what a task is, what a goal is, what the future is. It can't go against its better judgment to put something off for tomorrow because it can't really imagine tomorrow and it doesn't have a better judgment. On the other hand, if you give a monkey a history paper, I guarantee you it will need at least one extension. In fact, I hear that if you give a monkey an infinite number of extensions, it can actually write the entire works of William Shakespeare, but I think that's a different TED Talk. So if it's such a hard question to answer, whether or not monkeys can procrastinate, how about we turn the question on its head and ask, why is it that sometimes humans don't? How is it that we manage to take abstract things, goals, dreams, what we think of the future, and use it to transcend our immediate external stimuli? And the answer is in this structure of the brain, right there, that enormous thing in the front, that's called your prefrontal cortex. And that gives you impulse control, gives you the ability to think about the future. In people who have large amounts of damage to that part of the brain, they get what's called frontal syndrome. They can't think about the past or the future very well, and they have a very hard time resisting impulse. That's new. That's something that you guys have. The other prefrontal cortices in the image, Those are for other species. Those mainly just control voluntary movement. You got the upgrade, which is why you guys get to use it to think about the future. So why is it, that brings us back to the question, why is it that sometimes that fails? That sometimes we do just act on impulse? And that's where this guy comes in. This is your limbic system. Your limbic system does a lot of things, but one of the things it does best is interpret emotions. It's very well connected to the nucleus accumbens, which is your reward system. Broadly put, it knows what it wants. It is always telling you what it wants. In the spirit of brevity and making a memorable talk, meet your monkey brain. And so why is it that in a lot of cases, this monkey brain seems to win out against the more advanced, more rational parts of your thinking? One is that the prefrontal cortex needs to be consciously activated. You can maybe surf the internet or do email or whatever it is that you do to waste time without really thinking about it for long stretches of time, but you do sort of need to make a decision to sit down and start working on something unpleasant. The second reason that the balance of power might not be where you would expect is that it's actually really important that the limbic system has the ability to set off the fight or flight response. The limbic system is able to release norepinephrine, to adrenaline, to give you a fight or flight response, as I'm having right now, in times of distress, even though because it's important, if you're on the Serengeti, to have that part of your brain kick in very quickly if you need to run away from a tiger or a lion. So if that's the history, if that's the reason that we have an impulse that can often overcome the slower but more recent part of our brain that makes rational decisions, how can that inform how we think about procrastination in the immediate future? Well, first of all, big monolithic tasks, things that will take a lot of time that will be very difficult, are things that the monkey in your brain just hates. If you're having trouble starting on a task, the best thing to do is to break it up into very, very small pieces, because the monkey is basically fine with those. If you're having trouble breaking it up all at once at the beginning, it's still helpful to start out with the least amount of work that you can get done at the very beginning. Write the first few sentences of an essay, or just even gather the materials before you start your homework, just so that you can start getting into a cycle where your brain starts to reward itself with a little bit of dopamine for getting something done, rather than having a cycle where you're feeling lots of negative emotions, lots of guilt, lots of shame for avoiding things, which will then provoke more avoidance. Get a calendar. Calendars are good because once you are able to break up a task into lots of pieces, that reduces the amount of uncertainty, that makes them less frightening, and that in turn means that you're less likely to produce an anxiety response. The second thing that might be very helpful related to calendars is try as best as possible, if you're having a problem with procrastination, to set up external deadlines, to agree with a teacher or with a friend, to check in with you at certain points. Dan O'Reilly spoke about this in far more depth in his TED Talk, but when he gave a group of students 4 weeks to complete 3 papers, some students rationally decided that they would put all of the assignments on the very last day because they thought that would give them the most flexibility. They'd be able to choose when they did their work. And that makes sense if you assume that the impulse, the monkey brain, is going to disappear, about 5 days into the future, which is how I think a lot of us think, Me in the future is a great guy, and he doesn't really have anxiety about all of those things. And I buy him lots of nice things. I buy him books. I buy him exercise equipment, And I sign him up to do TED Talks, which is something that I usually don't find enjoyable, but I'm sure he's fine with public speaking. Once we are able to transcend that notion that, in the future, at some point, those things that scare us aren't going to scare us anymore, then we can start to, in the present, take steps to give ourselves accountability to try to outsmart our impulses in the future. The other set of students in Dan O'Reilly's experiment were able to decide to put their due dates at weekly spacings, and they wound up doing much, much better, even though they had less flexibility, because they understood that they would probably procrastinate a bit, and spacing things out meant that they were able to get more work done in the end. And finally, this is where I circle back to the question I put off at the very beginning. A study from 2010 at the University of Calgary demonstrated that procrastinators who procrastinated once and just felt terrible about it, they were filled with shame, they were racked with guilt, they felt the way that you try to look at to a teacher, if you've procrastinated on something. Those people wound up procrastinating much more on a second round of assignments because they had more negative associations with the work, with actually getting started. And so that monkey brain, because it's in charge of emotional regulation, right, tried to keep them away from that panic in the beginning and actually cause them to have stronger avoidant behaviors. So if you're able to forgive yourself a little bit, not necessarily say it's okay, but maybe celebrate your successes more than dwelling on your failures, then you're likely to be able to, more likely to be able to overcome your procrastination. And so these are the ways, I think, in which an understanding of the history of procrastination, in the ways that the history of our species informs the way we work now, can tell us how to deal with our relationship to procrastination in the present and how to deal with it in the future. Thank you very much.